Hello, Ms. Weinlander here, and today I'm going to go through the Algebra 1B Unit 4 Lesson 4 quiz retake. So it's about factoring to solve quadratic equations. And today we're going to do two main things. So first I'm going to go through all the problems on the original quiz. And then at some point during this video, I'm going to say a secret word. That's the word that you need to make sure you pay attention to and listen to, because you're going to fill that out below in the Google Forms. And if you get the secret word correct, then you can get your retake. So the first question is, what is the vertex of this graph? So that's where it changes from increasing to decreasing or decreasing to increasing. So it looks like it's right there. So at x is 1, y is 3. So we write that xy, or 1, 3. Number 2 was related to it. So it says, first, what's the vertex, which we got, and then it asks, is it a maximum or a minimum? So in this case, since it's right there, it is actually a maximum. On the y-axis, there's no y values that go higher than 3. All right, so let's go to number 3 here. A ball is thrown into the air with initial upward velocity of 46 feet per second. Its height, h, in feet after t seconds is given by the function h is equal to negative 16t squared plus 46t plus 6. After how many seconds will the ball hit the ground? So we've got to think about when a ball hits the ground, what does that represent? That would represent that the height is equal to 0. So this is where we're going to substitute in 0 for h and solve. So let's see. In our equation, that would leave us with 0 is equal to negative 16t squared plus 46t plus 6. Now, in order to solve this, there's many ways that you can. In this case, I'm going to factor it. So first of all, the first thing I notice is that they all have already a greatest common factor that I can kind of factor out to begin with. It also helps this first term not have a negative, because that's going to be really challenging to factor with. So let's factor out that negative, and it looks like they are all divisible by 2, so let's factor out negative 2. When we get that, negative 16t squared divided by negative 2 is 8t squared. 46t divided by negative 2 is negative 23t. 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. Now that we have that, we can factor. So over here, I'm just going to kind of write what I do every time I factor. I always write down my a, b, and c. So a is that coefficient of your x squared, or in this case t squared term. So it's 8, b is negative 23, c is negative 3. You want to find what ac is equal to, so it's 8 times negative 3, or negative 24. Because remember, you're looking for factors of ac, so in this case factors of negative 24, that add, or that sum to b, or negative 23. So in this case, you can write down a lot of different options and start trying kind of trial and error. So one factor is 1 and negative 24, and that actually immediately gets us to negative 23. So that's what we want. So that means we're going to break our b term into those factors. So when we do that, we still have that negative 2, and inside here we have that 8t squared minus 24t plus 1t minus 3, because from there we can start factoring. So here we're looking for the greatest common factor, which is going to be 8t. When we do that, 8t squared divided by 8t is t. Negative 24t divided by 8t is negative 3. Do a similar thing for these two terms. What do they have in common? Just 1, it looks like. So when we divide them by 1, we get t minus 3, which is good. We want those two to be the same. So now we have negative 2 still, and we have our first term of 8t plus 1, and our second term of t minus 3. Now that we have this factor, we can actually start solving. So what would have this equal to 0? Well, either of those factors were equal to 0, because anything times 0 is 0. So we have 8t plus 1 is equal to 0, and t minus 3 is equal to 0. Either of those options could work. So when we solve for t, we get 8t is equal to negative 1 divided by 8. We get t is equal to negative 1/8. Or t is equal to 3. Now it asks us after how many seconds will the ball hit the ground? Well, negative 1/8 seconds doesn't really make sense with this question, so our answer is going to be 3, or 3 seconds. Now for number 4, you're still using a similar equation, but we're doing something a little bit different. It says a ball is thrown into the air with initial velocity of 30 feet or 60 feet per second. Its height h in feet after t seconds is given by the function h is equal to negative 16t squared plus 60t plus 6. What will the height be at t is equal to 3 seconds? Let's substitute that in. So negative 16. Now for t, we're going to use 3. Let's start simplifying. So 3 squared is 9. Now don't be afraid to use your calculator to kind of check your mental math here. So negative 16 times 9 is negative 144. 60 times 3 is 180. Now we can add all these together and we get 42. So will the height be at t is equal to 3 seconds? 42 feet. All right, let's do number 5. So this was just says solve. Now there's never just one way to solve it. But what I see right here with no kind of middle term, none of that b term, oh, lost my pen there for a second, is I can add 121 to both sides, and then I get x squared is equal to 121, square root both sides, and I get x is equal to plus or minus 11, because if x was equal to positive 11, 11 squared is 121, or if it was negative 11, and negative 11 squared is also 121. So you have to make sure you have both that positive and negative. Sometimes you just leave it with that positive negative sign, or you'll see it written out with each individual. Both ways are communicating the same thing, so whatever one kind of clicks more with you. All right, the next question does tell us to solve by factoring, so we know we have to factor. So a lot of times I start kind of initially with those, and I think in this case that a term is 1, so I know that the only way to get to m squared is m times m. Now I got to think of factors of 7 that add to 8. So 7 and 1. Now you can always kind of double check your work here. So you can always do the distribution. You could do like m squared plus 1m plus 7m plus 7. When you combine like terms, and as long as you get to your original, then you know that you did factor it correctly. Once you do get to the factoring, we're solving for equals to 0, and remember that the only way to get two numbers that are multiplying by each other to get to 0 is one of them's got to be 0. Now it could be either one, so we set up both of them to give us both of those options. So we solve for m, so in this case equal but opposite, subtract 7 from both sides, get negative 7. Equal but opposite as well, inverse operations to get m is equal to negative 1. And then you write them usually from least to greatest, so m is either equal to negative 7 or negative 1. Number 9 also has us solving by factoring. Now if you can't jump right into it, kind of like we did on the last question, you can break it down like we did on question 3. So remember a is 1, b is 2, c is negative 24, ac would be 1 times negative 24, so negative 24. And you're looking for factors of AC, so factors of negative 24, that add up or sum to 2. So we can start kind of doing trial and error. So maybe 1 and negative 24, that gets to negative 23. Let's try another one here. Let's kind of jump ahead here. So what about 3 and 8? One of them's going to be negative. So that would get us to negative 5, getting closer to 2. What about 4 and negative 6? That would get us negative 2. So what if instead we did negative 4 positive 6? Negative 4 plus 6 is 2. So that's our answer here. So those are our factors. So knowing that, we can do n minus 4 and n plus 6. In this case, unlike number 3, you can kind of jump right to this since our a term is 1. Now that we have that, just like before, we set up both of those terms equal to 0 because we know one of them at least has to be equal to 0. So in this case, inverse operations, add 4 to both sides, you get n is equal to 4. Or over here, inverse operation is subtract 6 from both sides, get n is equal to negative 6. So our answer is from least to greatest, negative 6 and 4. For number 10, it says one or more rectangular shaped piece of metal siding needs to be cut to cover the exterior of a pole barn. The area of the piece is 30 feet squared. The length is 1 less than 3 times the width. How wide should the metal piece be? Round to the nearest hundredth of a foot. Alright, so first of all, I see that the area of a rectangular shaped piece of metal is 30 feet. So I know that the area is equal to 30, and since it's a rectangle, I know the formula in general is area is equal to length times width. Some other information I'm given here is the length is 1 less than 3 times the width. So let's kind of write that algebraically. So 1 less than 3 times the width. So 3 times the width, and I want 1 less than that, and that's what the length is equal to. So that's my equation there. Length is equal to 3w minus 1. 3 times the width, 1 less than. Now we want to know how wide should the metal piece be. So we want to solve for w here. So let's start substituting in what we know. We know in general we're dealing with area is equal to length times width, but we know our area to be 30 feet squared in this case. Our length we know is 3w minus 1, and we're multiplying all of that times w. So let's start simplifying. We can do the distributive property, make sure every term is multiplied to every other term here. So we have 3w times w and negative 1 times w. So we have 3w squared minus w. In order to solve for w, let's put all the terms on one side. 30 minus 30 is 0. So we have 0 is equal to 3w squared minus w minus 30. Now from this looks like an equation that we've been dealing with. Now we can factor this. Alright, so off to the side I usually write my a, b, c, and ac. So a is equal to 3, b is equal to negative 1, c is equal to negative 30. So ac is 3 times negative 30, or negative 90. And remember, I'm looking for factors of ac, so factors of negative 90 that add or sum to b, in this case, negative 1. So since it's negative 1, I know that the factors got to be 1 away from each other, so pretty close. So what comes to my mind right away is ways to multiply to 90 is 9 times 10, but it's negative 90, so one of them's got to be negative. So if we do negative 9 times 10, the sum is negative 9 plus 10, so that leaves us with 1. So that didn't quite work out, so what if instead it was 9 times negative 10? 9 plus a negative 10 is negative 1, so those are the factors that we want to use. So when we kind of break this up, we want to have our negative w turn into 9w minus 10w. So plus 9w minus 10w minus 30. Now we can start thinking of these as two different groupings. So let's look at the greatest common factor. So I see that 3w. So 3w squared divided by 3w would just be w. 9w divided by 3w would just be 3. The greatest common factor here between negative 10w and negative 30, I know it's going to be negative. Looks like we can divide them both by 10. So negative 10w divided by negative 10 is just w. Negative 30 divided by negative 10 is 3. And because these are the same, we know that we figured it out. So now we have 0 is equal to 3w minus 10 and w plus 3. So set them both equal to 0 in order to solve. So w is equal to 10 divided by 3. Or, since it does say to round to the nearest foot, we can do 10 divided by 3. We get 3.33. Or, w plus 3 is equal to 0, minus 3 minus 3, w equals negative 3. Well, the width's probably not going to be negative 3. Width of something's not negative, so we know our width is 3.33 feet. And that's to the 100th, so awesome.